Well, the news this week is no longer news. Hundreds of innocent people massacred every day by an Israeli government led by extremists and armed to the teeth with US weapons. Anyone who doubts that Israel's strategy is ethnic cleansing is deliberately looking away. Does it count formally as genocide? The scholars will debate the legal aspects. The fact that it is plausibly genocide, according to the International Court of Justice, is surely enough. When people say Israel needs to work out what its plan is after the conflict, they are being naive. Israel's plan is clear: to make Gaza unlivable. What Hamas did was evil. But who can think that killing 10,000 children in the space of 4 months is ever a justifiable course of action? It is hard to manage our anger at what we're seeing and our impotence to do something about the role of powerful countries cooperating with this grave injustice, particularly if you're a citizen of one of those countries like I am. We often assume, don't we, that international cooperation implies something positive, but here we have major Western powers cooperating in a massacre, either actively by providing money and weapons or passively by refusing to speak out, by refusing to bring diplomatic pressure to bear. And then we have to watch these very people talking on our televisions about the aid that they're trying to get to the starving Palestinian people who wouldn't be starving if it weren't for the violence being perpetrated on them, with which the aid givers are complicit. It's mind-blowing hypocrisy. It's the grandstanding as people that care. It's the pretend compassion, or maybe real compassion, but without integrity, courage, coherence. It's hard to understand the mindset of those politicians who try to minimize what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank and then turn up with trucks of food. People who you thought would share your basic internationalist and humanist values. And it's noteworthy that Samantha Power, the head of USAID, has apparently been confronted by her own staff about US policy on Gaza. She literally wrote the book on genocide. How is it that rather than resign her post, she now stands impotent next to trucks full of food for the people forced into starvation by the bombs provided by her own country? Aidwashing injustice. What's the point of being president or prime minister or leader of an opposition or head of a cooperation agency if you're going to sit out a genocide? What's the more important thing that you have to stay in power for? All of this should make us reflect on the complex dual, triple, quadruple role of aid in Palestine and indeed elsewhere. I wrote a piece in The Guardian over a decade ago about aid washing in Palestine. Aid washing is similar to greenwashing, which is when businesses give the impression of being environmentally friendly and socially responsible while not fundamentally changing harmful core business practices. And of course, this quite deliberately diverts attention from those fundamentals. And governments do that too, showcasing the smiling faces of aid recipients while staunchly opposing the basic steps required to build a fairer world. And the practice has been perfected by the US and the European Union in Palestine, harping on about their generosity to the Palestinian people through aid programs, while undermining any serious attempts to achieve political settlement that would render aid less necessary. My article was influenced by a great friend, Noura Lester Murad, a Jewish woman with a Palestinian family who co-founded the brilliant Dahlia Foundation, who said to me years ago that aid was doing more harm than good in Palestine because it responded to the symptoms, but deliberately obfuscated the causes of the problem. And in the article, I referred to the various strategies Palestinians were using to cope with poverty under prolonged Israeli occupation, including restricted food intake, reducing health and education spendings, running down savings, and selling off assets. And this is back in 2011. US and European aid to Palestine, I said, was an example of life support with no end game in sight, a sop for political failure. Well, I'm just out of a seminar on aid washing led by an organization called Global Dev for Palestine, and we heard experts explain how aid had been intended to make life just about bearable, without changing anything in reality. And worse, how it's been used to undermine the struggle for liberation. How? By attaching conditions. It's aid as bribery to very desperate people. You can have this help if you promise not to produce material promoting a Palestinian state or whatever it might be. This is how aid can undermine a vibrant Palestinian civil society. This is how aid can have the effect, intended or not, and I think it often is, of dampening down political resistance to an unjust status quo. We heard about the gradual deterioration of conditions for the Palestinian people, even as billions are spent by USAID and other aid agencies and hyped up in their glossy annual reports. Why deterioration? Because development is impossible in the conditions of occupation facilitated by the governments of these aid agencies. And astonishingly, some estimate that as much as 70% of aid to Palestine ends up in the Israeli economy anyway. And that was before October the 7th. By God, aid washing has taken on a whole new meaning in recent months. It is grotesque to watch US and UK and EU politicians tell us about their efforts to bring aid to Gaza while they actively back or passively sit out a massacre and the near total destruction of Gazan infrastructure. Meanwhile, they're accused of aid trucks on the border with Egypt, prevented from entering despite the clear instructions of the International Court of Justice. Are we to believe that powerful governments are unable to intervene? And now some countries have cut off support to UNRWA, the lifeline of so many Palestinians. Maybe they aren't even bothering to aid wash anymore. And you can just imagine, can't you, when this dreadful conflict is over, the major aid agencies of those countries providing, quote, aid to help rebuild Gaza. Well, how can we combat aid washing? It would be good to hear your views. The first thing is to recognize it, not hard in this case in Gaza. Then you need to build coherence so that financial cooperation is part of a strategy towards justice rather than an anomaly. Cooperation agencies must situate themselves within the political context, as must NGOs, and they need to develop holistic and honest evaluation processes which measure all the impacts of aid, not just obvious ones. You have to work to make accountability for aid spending evolve in two ways. First, more multilateral, reducing the influence of particular governments and enhancing international and global accountability. And second, more local, ensuring that the voices and priorities of local communities and representatives are more present in decision making. And you need to empower people in your organization and in partner organizations to question and critique aid practices. In the Global Dev for Palestine seminar, some of the speakers were able to summon up hope despite today's awful reality, looking at the groundswell of solidarity around the world, the disgust at what is happening. Can we dare to believe that change may finally come for Palestine? And of course, help will be needed today, tomorrow, and for many years to come. Financial, humanitarian, developmental, technical, you name it. Call it aid if you will. But it must be constructed to support the Palestinian people's vision of self-determination, not to undermine it. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this Global Cooperation Update. It's available on video, on podcast, and also actually in a written version, which you can find on Medium. And there'll be links to all of those in the description. And do subscribe, of course, to all those things. If you want to learn more about Global Nation, then you'll also find a link somewhere. And watch out for the Spanish version, which is coming along soon.